we're expecting to hear on Thursday from the state medical examiner as what the official cause of death is.
According to testimony in municipal court, investigators have charged an individual as a person of interest on unrelated charges. The 65-year-old man was questioned in the hours after Fortune was found hanging from a tree in the backyard of a vacant house on Road of Remembrance 1 week ago.
He said they argued. He said they weren't together. He said he had nothing to do with it. 3 denials, 1 dead woman, and a rope in a tree behind an abandoned house that nobody can explain. Her name was Tasia Fortune. She was 29 years old, and 9 days after her body was found hanging in that backyard, the man who admitted to fighting with her that night still hasn't been charged with her death. He's sitting in a jail cell right now, just not for that. Before we go further into this, I need 30 seconds of your time. Every single case we cover on this channel is a real person who existed, who had a family, who had a life that mattered. Tasia Fortune was a mother of 4. She had a mother who is right now waking up every single day without her daughter. If this channel means anything to you, if these stories matter to you, hit subscribe, tap that bell, and like this video before we go any further. It costs you nothing, and it tells the algorithm to put her story in front of more people who might actually know something. Families like hers don't get justice from silence. They get it from attention. Let's give her that. Let's talk about who Tasia Fortune actually was, because before this became a headline, she was a person with a story that started long before August 3rd. She had lived in Mississippi for more than 10 years. She was a mother of 4 children. The people who loved her described her the same way, over and over. Strong-minded, big-hearted, vibrant, someone who, according to her aunt, gave far more than she had. That detail matters, because we're about to learn that Tasia Fortune's life, in its final weeks, was not simple. She was reportedly struggling with substance use. She had, according to people close to the situation, been living inside that same abandoned house where she was eventually found. Not visiting. Living. That's not a small detail. That a woman who had fallen into a genuinely precarious situation in a vacant, decaying property owned by a real estate trust that owns 21 other properties across the county. A woman who was, by every account, still deeply loved by her family, but who was also, in the final chapter of her life, existing on the margins. And on July 26th, just about a week before she died, she went home, not to Mississippi, to Kentucky for a family reunion. Her mother, Christy Spivey, was there. And here's where the psychology starts to get complicated, because when Spivey later described that visit to reporters, she didn't describe a woman in crisis. She said her daughter seemed better than she had in a long time, at peace, not erratic, not spiraling. A woman who laughed, who had faith, who seemed, in her mother's eyes, like she was doing okay. Now hold that thought, because it's about to collide with something very different. 6 days after that family reunion, on the night of Monday, August 3rd, neighbors in a quiet residential block called Road of Remembrance in Jackson, Mississippi, called the police. They had found a body, hanging from a tree, in the overgrown backyard of a vacant, boarded-up house. Police arrived just after 9 at night and confirmed it. A woman, at that point unidentified. It would take 3 more days before the Hinds County Coroner's Office could officially confirm what a lot of people in that neighborhood had already started to fear. The woman was Tasia Fortune. Here's what I want you to sit with for a second. A mother who says her daughter seemed at peace, better than she'd been in years, less than 2 weeks before her death. And then a body in a tree behind an abandoned house in a state with one of the darkest histories of racial violence in the entire country. Those 2 facts don't cancel each other out. They sit next to each other uncomfortably, and they force a question that nobody involved in this case can answer yet. What happened in those 6 days? And that brings us to the man at the center of this story, Terence Anderson, 65 years old. He lived in the same block as the crime scene, close enough that this wasn't some stranger crossing paths with Tasia Fortune by accident. This was proximity, familiarity. According to his brother Tony, Terence and Tasia had a 5-year-old son together, a child who was living with Terence at the time. So right away, before we even get to what happened that night, we have a man with an existing, ongoing, intimate connection to the victim, not a passing acquaintance. The father of her child. When detectives brought him in Anderson admitted something significant. He told them he'd had an argument with Tasia Fortune shortly before she was found dead. Let that sit for a second, because in criminal psychology, that kind of admission is a fork in the road. On one hand, it could be exactly what it sounds like, an honest man volunteering an uncomfortable truth because he has nothing to hide. On the other hand, it's also exactly the kind of admission someone makes when they know witnesses might place them at the scene anyway, and getting ahead of that story is safer than being caught in a lie later. But here's where it gets stranger. Police asked him directly if he and Tasia were in a relationship. He said no. He denied that entirely. And yet his own brother, speaking publicly, described a much closer bond than that denial suggests. A shared child, a custody arrangement, essentially where the boy lived with him. That's not the profile of two people with no relationship. That's the profile of two people whose lives were deeply, permanently entangled, whether they were romantically involved in that moment or not. So why deny it? Maybe he was protecting himself legally. Maybe the relationship really had ended, and he wanted to be precise about that. Or maybe there's something about the nature of that relationship, something about how it had evolved or deteriorated, that he didn't want on the record. We don't know, and I want to be very clear with you, because this channel takes that seriously. Terence Anderson has not been charged in connection with Tasia Fortune's death. Nothing here should be taken as proof of guilt. What we're doing is looking at the psychology of the information that is publicly known and asking the same questions any behavioral analyst would ask. Now here's the twist that turned this from a quiet local tragedy into a case with federal attention. For days after Tasia Fortune's body was found, on that Tuesday, Terence Anderson was arrested, not for her death, for something else entirely, being a felon in possession of a firearm, a completely separate charge, tied to his status as a convicted felon. The judge set his bond at $250,000, and Anderson was taken to Hinds County Detention Center, where he remains as of this recording. Think about the timing of that for a moment. A man is questioned about a woman's death. He admits to arguing with her. He denies a relationship his own brother confirms existed. And then within days, he's picked up on a gun charge. Is that a coincidence? Law enforcement circling someone to the only legal tool available to them while the primary investigation continues behind the scenes? Or is it exactly what it appears to be on paper? Two unrelated situations that happen to intersect around the same person at the same time? His brother, for what it's worth, insists Terence had stayed out of trouble for years, worked steadily as a painter, and looked after that little boy. A man who, in his family's eyes, does not fit the profile of someone capable of this. And this is where the case widens into something bigger than one house on one street. Because Tasia Fortune's death did not happen in a vacuum. In the past year, Mississippi has now seen multiple people found hanging, in circumstances that immediately raise painful historical questions in a state responsible for more documented lynchings than any other in America. Two of those earlier cases were ultimately ruled suicides by medical examiners. Whether this case follows that same path is something nobody can say yet, because the autopsy results have not been released, not to the public, possibly not even to the family. That silence is its own kind of psychological weight. A local councilman felt strongly enough about the uncertainty to write directly to the U.S. Attorney's Office, calling this a murder before any official ruling existed, and asking for federal involvement. Meanwhile, voices like Bernice King, who understands generational trauma around exactly this kind of imagery better than almost anyone in this country, publicly urge people not to jump conclusions, while also acknowledging that the fear this case triggers in Black communities is not irrational. It's earned. Both things are true at once. Caution is necessary, and the fear is real. So here's where we're left. A woman who seemed at peace with her mother less than 2 weeks before she died. A man who admits to fighting with her, denies a relationship his own family confirms, and ends up in jail on a separate charge days later. A body in a tree behind a house owned by an absentee property trust. An autopsy result the public still doesn't have. And a state with a history that makes every unanswered question feel heavier than it might elsewhere. I want you to think about something before we close this out. When someone tells you they weren't in a relationship with a person they share a child with, what does that denial actually protect? Is it a legal instinct kicking in, self-preservation in the presence of detectives? Or is it something deeper, a discomfort with how that relationship had actually been functioning behind closed doors? And when a mother says her daughter seemed at peace, better than she'd been in years, what do we do with the 6 days of silence that followed? The days nobody outside that circle can account for. Was this a tragedy that unfolded entirely inside Tasia Fortune's own private struggle, what her family simply didn't see coming? Or was there another hand involved in how this ended? Someone who knew her, who was close enough to share a child with her, close enough to be standing near her in her final hours. Tell me what you think happened in the comments. Walk me through your theory, because this case is still open, still unresolved, and the people who love Tasia Fortune deserve more than silence while they wait for answers. If this video helped you understand the psychology behind this case, subscribe to Psychology of Crime and hit that bell so you don't miss where this story goes next.